My girlfriend said, I told everyone we are trying for a baby. Now we have to, or I look like a liar. We'd never discuss children. I said, you made a commitment, not me. Then I ended the relationship and got a vasectomy to prevent future manipulation. I'm James, 34, male. The kind of guy who reads the fine print on everything. Contracts, warranties, lease agreements. I'm an engineer by trade. I think in systems. I plan. So when I tell you that what happened to me was the most calculated ambush I've ever experienced, understand that I don't say that lightly. My girlfriend and I had been together for 2 years when everything fell apart. She was sharp, social, the kind of person who could walk into any room and own it within 10 minutes. I admired that about her for a long time. I also eventually learned to be very wary of it. We met at a mutual friend's barbecue. She laughed at something I said that wasn't even that funny, and I was done for. Classic story. We moved in together after 8 months, which looking back was probably faster than it should have been, but things felt solid. We had what I genuinely believed were real conversations, finances, career goals, lifestyle. Kids came up exactly once, casually, in a tone so light it barely registered as a discussion. I'm not sure I want them, I had said honestly. She had shrugged. Same, we'll see. That was the whole conversation. 2 sentences, said on a couch on a random weeknight, never revisited, never built on. 14 months before everything exploded. I want you to hold on to that, 2 sentences, because she certainly held on to them, just differently than I did. It started on a Tuesday. She came home from dinner with her sister looking flushed and excited, which I assumed was the wine. She sat down next to me on the couch, tucked her feet under her the way she always did, and said almost offhandedly, like she was mentioning she'd picked up milk. So, I told my sister we've been trying for a baby. I turned to look at her slowly. What? She was going on about her pregnancy and I felt left out, so I kind of said we were trying to. I set the remote down. We are not trying. I know, but we've never discussed trying. We've never seriously discussed wanting kids at all. She waved her hand, this little dismissive gesture that I would come to think about a lot in the following weeks. It was just something to say in the moment, but now she's told my mom, and my mom told some aunts, and honestly the whole family kind of knows at this point, so what? She looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen on her before, patient, measured, like she was explaining something straightforward to someone who was being unnecessarily slow about it. So we kind of have to start trying now or I look like a liar. The room went very quiet. I said, say that again. I'm not saying we have to have a baby right this second. I'm just saying we should at least be open to it because I've already told everyone and it would be really embarrassing to walk it back now. You told everyone without asking me. It wasn't a big deal when I said it. But now you're using it as leverage. She shifted on the couch. I'm not using it as leverage. I'm saying the situation has evolved and we need to deal with it together as a couple. That word, together, landed completely wrong. Because nothing about any of this had been together. This had been entirely, completely, 100% her. She had gone to dinner, made up a story, let it spread through her entire family, and then come home and presented me with the bill. You made a commitment, I said, not me. The patient expression cracked. Are you seriously going to let me be humiliated in front of my entire family because you won't even consider this? I'm not asking you to be humiliated. I'm telling you I didn't agree to something you announced on my behalf. You're being so rigid about this. I'm being clear, there's a difference. She stared at me for a moment, then quietly, almost gently, she said, I think you should really consider what you're willing to lose over this. I looked at her. She held my gaze. And right there, in that moment, I understood exactly what I was dealing with. I lay awake that night and ran the whole thing back like a problem set, the way my brain works, whether I want it to or not. What she had done was precise. She hadn't asked me. She hadn't floated the idea. She had simply announced a reality to her entire family and then shown up at home and told me the new reality required my participation. The social pressure was already built. The family expectations were already set. All that was left was for me to fall in line. I was not confused about what this was. This was a trap, and it had been sitting there for about 24 hours before she bothered to mention it to me. Over the next week, she ran what I can only describe as a campaign. It was organized, it was layered, and looking back, I think she believed it would work. First came the soft pressure. Parenting magazines appeared on the coffee table. She started mentioning friends who had kids and how fulfilled they seemed. Little comments, deniable individually, relentless collectively. Don't you think we'd be good at it though? The implication always being that my reluctance was the only obstacle between us and this wonderful life she was painting. Then came the family pressure, which I honestly had not anticipated at that scale. Her mother called me, started warm, got pointed fast. She's not getting any younger, you know. You love her, don't you? Her sister sent me a long text about her own pregnancy had changed her life. A couple of aunts liked old photos of us on social media in a way that felt coordinated, though I can't prove that. What I can tell you is that it didn't feel organic. It felt briefed, like she had gone back to her family with a strategy session and everyone had their assignments. Then came the guilt. She started crying about how telling everyone had made it real for her. I didn't know I wanted this until I said it out loud. She told me one evening, and I remember sitting there thinking, that's the most honest thing you've said in 2 weeks, and it still doesn't change anything. Because what she was describing was a feeling that had been manufactured by her own lie and then handed to me like it was my responsibility to resolve. I told her clearly one evening, kitchen table, no TV on, nothing to distract from it. I do not want children. I have never wanted children. That position hasn't changed and it isn't going to. I'm sorry that your family knows something that isn't true, but I can't fix that for you by becoming a different person. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, flat and calm, then I'll tell them you changed your mind, that you backed out, that you're the reason this didn't happen. There it was. No more soft pressure, no more tears, no more carefully managed patience, just the actual ultimatum she'd been building toward. That's your choice, I said. She seemed surprised I didn't flinch. That surprise told me a lot. I didn't end things that night. I gave it 4 more days because I needed to be certain I wasn't reacting emotionally. I went through every angle I could think of. Was I being too rigid? Was there a version of this conversation where she had a legitimate point I was missing? I tried genuinely to steelman her position. And every single time I came back to the same.
She had tried to manufacture my consent by building a social obligation before I knew one was being constructed. When that didn't work, she recruited her family. When that didn't work, she threatened my reputation. There was no version of those 3 moves that a person makes in good faith. On a Saturday morning, I told her it was over. I had my key on the counter before I started talking, which I think told her immediately that this wasn't a negotiation. She went through several responses in quick succession: shock, then anger, then a sudden tearful reversal where she said we didn't have to have kids. She'd tell everyone she made it up. We could go back to how things were. I had been expecting that one. It was the only card she hadn't played yet. 2 weeks ago, you told me you'd be humiliated if I didn't go along with this, I said. Last week, you said you'd tell everyone I backed out. Now you're saying you'll take it all back. Which version of this am I supposed to believe? She didn't have an answer. I left. I want to talk about what happened next, because I think it's the part of this story that people have the strongest reaction to. and I want to be accurate about it. 3 weeks after the breakup, I scheduled a vasectomy consultation. I want to be completely direct here. I had been thinking about this for years. My position on not wanting children wasn't something I had arrived at because of her or because of this situation. It was a long-standing, considered position about my own life. The breakup didn't create the decision. If anything, going through that whole experience clarified that I had been putting off a practical step I had already decided on in principle. The consultation happened. I went through the counseling process my urologist required, which is standard. They want to make sure you're not making an impulsive call. And the procedure was scheduled about 6 weeks out. I had it done on a Thursday, outpatient procedure. Back to work that Monday. I told almost no one. I mentioned it to 2 close friends, both of whom knew my long-standing position on kids, and neither of whom were remotely surprised. I did not tell my ex-girlfriend. We were not together. We had no children, no shared medical decisions, no relationship that gave her any standing in a medical choice I made about my own body. There was no reason to tell her, and I didn't. She found out anyway, roughly 2 months after the procedure, I assume through a mutual friend, though I never confirmed how. The call came on a Sunday evening, and I almost didn't pick up. "You did this because of me," she said when I answered. Not a question, a statement. "I did this because I've never wanted children, and I had been considering it for a long time. You're punishing me. I'm making a medical decision about my own body. You did this so I can never come back and try to work things out. We're not getting back together. Everyone is going to know you did this out of spite. Everyone is going to know whatever story you decide to tell them," I said. "You've shown you're good at that." She hung up. Then came the rumor, and this is where things got genuinely ugly. Within about a week of that call, I started getting texts, mutual acquaintances, some closer than others. The story being circulated went something like this. We had been genuinely trying for a baby together. I had gotten cold feet. I ended the relationship while she was emotionally invested in starting a family, and then I spitefully got a vasectomy, specifically to hurt her. I was being described as someone who had changed his mind about kids, and then made sure she couldn't change it back. I want to pause on that last part, because it reflects a fundamental misunderstanding of basic biology that apparently did not stop anyone from repeating it. A vasectomy affects my fertility, not hers. Her ability to have children with someone else was entirely unaffected, but feelings travel faster than logic, and the story spread anyway. I watched it happen for about 2 weeks and said nothing. I'm a private person. I don't air personal business publicly, but the narrative kept expanding, and it started touching things I actually cared about. One of my closer friends went noticeably quiet, clearly uncomfortable, having heard only her version of events. A professional contact made a comment at lunch that suggested he'd caught some version of the story. It was getting into spaces I couldn't ignore. I'm an engineer. When a system is producing bad outputs, you don't just complain about the outputs. You find where the bad data entered, and you correct it. Here's what I did, and I'm going to be specific, because vague revenge is unsatisfying, and also, this wasn't really about revenge, it was about accuracy. The first thing I did was reach out to the close friend who had pulled back. I asked if we could get together and talk. He said yes, and I sat with him for about 2 hours with my phone on the table between us. I walked through the entire timeline. I had texts saved, not because I had anticipated needing them, but because I don't delete texts. I'm a data person. The text thread was all there, including the message where she told me, in plain writing, that we
Kinda have to start trying now, or I look like a liar. Including the message where she said she'd tell everyone I backed out. I had the voicemail from the Sunday call too. My state is a one-party consent state, meaning it's legal to record a call you're a participant in. And my phone had recorded it automatically through an app I'd set up for work calls and never turned off. He read the text slowly. He listened to part of the voicemail. Then he was quiet for a while. She told me you two had been actively trying, like for months. When did she say this started? He gave me a rough time frame. I pulled up a photo she had posted of us during that period, a concert we'd gone to, both of us smiling, nothing about babies, no context that suggested anything other than two people at a show, having a normal night. The date on the post matched the time frame he'd been given. She built the whole story backward, he said. Yes. He was back in my corner before we left that night. I had that same conversation, in different forms, with 4 other people over the following 2 weeks. Each time I brought the documentation, each time I let the texts in the timeline speak for themselves. I didn't editorialize, I didn't call her names, I just showed people what had actually happened, and let them draw their own conclusions. The second thing I did was send my ex-girlfriend a text, one text, measured and clear. I ran the language past a friend who practices civil law before I sent it, just to make sure I wasn't crossing any lines. It said, "I'm aware of the version of events you've been sharing with people we know. I have documentation of the actual sequence of events, including our text conversations and a recorded phone call. If the false statements continue in a way that damages my professional or personal reputation, I will need to look at my options. I'm asking you to stop." She didn't respond. The texts from mutual acquaintances slowed down significantly within 10 days of sending it. But there was still the matter of her mother. Her mother had been vocal in a community group that overlapped with some of my professional connections. She had told people there that I had abandoned her daughter after stringing her along about having a family.
Had made its way back to me in a professional context that was genuinely uncomfortable. I couldn't let that sit. I didn't confront her mother. I didn't show up anywhere or make a scene. What I did was write out a clear, factual, chronological account of everything that had happened. The original lie, the family pressure campaign, the ultimatum, the threat, the post-breakup rumor. And I shared it privately with one person I had an established professional relationship with in that community group. I didn't ask him to do anything with it. I just made sure the accurate version of events was in the room. About 3 weeks later, I heard through a separate connection that her mother had stopped discussing me entirely. I was told someone in that group had asked her some questions she wasn't able to answer cleanly. I don't know the specifics of that conversation, and I don't need to. The outcome was sufficient. The most unexpected part came about 8 weeks after all of this had settled. A woman I knew tangentially, someone who had been in my ex's corner early on, reached out to me. She had been one of the first people my ex told the "we were trying" story to. She'd seen the texts, not from me. My ex had apparently shown them to her at some point while building sympathy, not thinking carefully about what they actually said. "I read the one where she told you that you had to start trying or she'd look like a liar," she told me. "I genuinely don't know what she thought I was going to take from that." "What did you take from it?" "That she told her whole family a lie to put pressure on you, and when it didn't work, she told everyone a different lie to save face. There was nothing to add to that. She had said it exactly right." My ex started dating someone new a few months after all of this. I know because we have a few unavoidable mutual connections, not because I've kept tabs on her. I did hear at some point that she had told people in her new social circle a version of the story where the vasectomy was an act of deliberate cruelty aimed at her. She had apparently placed herself so completely at the center of my medical history that she couldn't see how that framing sounded to anyone thinking about it for more than a moment. I'm not angry about any of it anymore.
The reputational damage she attempted didn't stick, because I made sure the people who mattered had accurate information. The people who chose to believe her version anyway were, in hindsight, not people whose opinions were going to be useful to me in any direction. That's the thing about a situation like this. It works as a filter. You find out pretty quickly who actually knows you, and who was just occupying space in your life. The vasectomy was the right decision. It was the right decision before she came into my life, and it was right when I made it. It's still right now. That choice was never about her, even though she worked very hard to make it about her. My body, my medical history, my future, those belong to me. The moment I let someone else's social maneuvering drive decisions in that space, I lose something that doesn't come back. I think about the version of my life where the pressure worked, where the family calls landed, where the guilt landed, where the threat to my reputation landed, and where I couldn't find a way to say no without being painted as the villain, where I became a parent because my girlfriend announced it to her relatives before telling me, and I couldn't withstand the social weight of being the person who said no afterward. That version exists somewhere. I chose not to live there. My position on children was not a negotiating posture. It wasn't an open bid. It was a straightforward fact about myself that I had stated plainly from the beginning of our relationship. The moment she decided she could reroute that by constructing social obligations without my knowledge, she told me everything I needed to know about how she actually saw me. Not as a partner in the decisions that shaped our shared life, as a variable to be managed until he gets with the program. She was right that I changed things. I changed my relationship status and made a medical decision, and I did both completely on my own terms, because those were the only terms that were ever honest. If this story hit a little too close to home, and you kept nodding along the whole way through, maybe subscribe, because apparently we both need a place where personal boundaries don't require a family vote to be considered valid.